Kageyama Ryo, a third-year high school student living a peaceful otaku life, opened a gacha and burned through all his stones without pulling a single good card. At the clubroom, Ryo pulled his kuhai Asahi into a hug, mistaking her for someone else. His best friend Yuta walked in right as it happened, stunned by the scene in front of him. Yuta backed away awkwardly, apologizing and excusing himself, leaving Ryo confused about what had just happened between his friend and the girl. Alone with his phone, Ryo realized he had been so absorbed in his gacha pulls that he completely missed the fact that Yuta had fallen in love. Ryo despaired at the thought of losing another otaku friend to romance, feeling like everyone around him was slowly leaving their shared hobby behind while he stayed the same. Lying face down, Ryo mourned his rotten luck, calling himself pathetic for having no good pulls and an increasingly distant best friend. Asahi, smug as ever, teased Ryo about his lack of popularity, mocking his love for outdated otaku hobbies, while snapping selfies nearby. She pushed her taunts further, calling him a coward hiding in fictional worlds, telling him it was time he faced reality instead of chasing 2D characters. Ryo forced a tense smile, visibly irritated as Asahi needled him about his hobbies and his lack of luck in games. Kohinata Asahi, his childhood friend and neighbor, was introduced properly, a first year known among classmates mostly for her looks, rather than her personality. Ryo admitted that he had always been pestered by Asahi, though there was clearly more to their bond than her constant teasing. He found himself lost, describing his favorite character Saren in exhausting detail, gushing over her maturity and healing abilities before Asahi cut him off. Calling his rambling gross, Asahi admitted, mouthful of snacks, that she only visited the otaku club because of the manga and treats available there. The room, officially named the Modern Culture Exchange Club, was in truth nothing more than an otaku hangout in disguise. Yuta greeted Asahi warmly as she entered, hinting that he had been meaning to share something important with Ryo. Yuta admitted their friendship was a tangled one he couldn't quite walk away from, prompting teasing from the others about how close he and Ryo were. Asked whether she wanted to officially join the club, Asahi grew flustered, deflecting the question while avoiding eye contact. Yuta cut the tension short, playfully declaring it was Ryo's turn to speak with Asahi. Ryo muttered that even social awkwardness had limits, unsettled by how strange his friends were acting around the topic. Asahi's confident mask slipped, her anxiety surfacing as she admitted that only in front of Ryo could she act bold. Since childhood, Asahi had few friends of her own, and Ryo remained the one person who always paid attention to her, a bond that carried into their years at the same school. Ryo brought up that a week had passed since Asahi started high school, mentioning that with his graduation only a year away, he hoped she would make some friends of her own. Asahi snapped at him to be quiet, while Ryo countered that spending 3 years alone would be a rough way to get through school. She fired back that she already had otaku friends, and was living a fulfilling youth, refusing to take advice from someone who had never even had a girlfriend. Asahi pressed further, taunting that his years without a girlfriend matched his age exactly, warning that everyone around him would eventually return to reality without him. She needled him about Yuta getting a girlfriend, watching him wince as the comment hit closer than she expected, calling it a fresh wound she had just reopened. Ryo brushed her off, insisting he didn't need a girlfriend, as long as he had his favorite character and his friends, prompting Asahi to accept the challenge with a sly smile. Holding a pocky stick between her lips, she asked if she should become his girlfriend instead, catching him completely off guard. Flustered, Ryo answered that it would only count if she managed to win against him. Asahi explained the rules of the pocky game, warning that whoever let go or broke the stick first would lose, leaving Ryo stunned by the sudden challenge. She teased that she was only giving him a chance out of pity, since a loner like him would never get a real girl to notice him otherwise. Ryo replied flatly that he had never once seen her as a woman, catching her off guard for a moment. He added that Siren was the only one who held his interest, leaving Asahi visibly stunned by his blunt rejection. Composing herself, she dismissed him as someone not worth bothering with, since he always said foolish things anyway. Asahi pointed out that he could only pull off the pocky game so easily because he never saw her as a girl, claiming she had more experience and felt no nerves around him. She teased him relentlessly, calling him a gross otaku, unpopular, and inexperienced, landing hit after hit until he could barely respond. Growing irritated, Ryo decided he couldn't let her keep getting the upper hand, while Asahi laughed at how easily she could fluster him. With a sharp smile, he decided it was time to teach the brat a lesson, leaving her startled by the sudden shift in his expression. He declared he would finish the game himself, closing the distance while Asahi's confidence wavered and her face flushed red. Their lips met, ending the game neither of them expected to actually finish. The pocky game held with both of them frozen in place, neither willing to be the first to pull back as the stick shrank between their lips. Rio couldn't understand why Asahi looked so composed, wondering if she actually had experience with something like this, while quietly noting how close their faces had gotten. He caught himself admitting she looked pretty from that distance, quickly denying it out loud when she asked if he was the nervous one. Both of them grew flustered internally, worried the other would end up making them look foolish if they backed down first. Rio repeated to himself to keep his thoughts pure, tension rising as Asahi asked how he was holding up. Startled by her expression up close, he blurted out a question about her face, breaking the tense mood. Asahi shot back, asking if he was the one being self-conscious instead of her. The moment ended abruptly as Rio lost his balance and crashed forward, breaking the stick and toppling toward her. He tumbled off his chair entirely, letting out a pained cry as Asahi asked what exactly he thought he was doing. She denied being conscious of him at all, insisting he had only imagined she might like him, while he clutched his face, claiming he was just trying to hold back laughter. Rio reminded her that technically she was the one losing badly, telling her not to act so arrogant when she hadn't actually won. He pointed out the broken Pocky and her fall from the chair, declaring himself the winner despite her flustered denial. Asahi insisted through tears that she hadn't lost yet, her earlier confidence completely gone. Rio watched her reaction, his expression softening slightly at the sight of her genuine embarrassment. He apologized for teasing her too much, admitting he had been a little mean, while she muttered about neither of them having a girlfriend or boyfriend. He added that whoever she ended up with had to be someone she truly liked, not just anyone. Startled by his words, Asahi quietly admitted that she did like someone, catching herself off guard by the confession. Sometime later, walking home, she muttered to herself that he shouldn't only look at 2D girls and should notice her sometimes too. Rio left her house afterward, irritated at himself for getting flustered over someone like Asahi. The next day, back at the clubroom, he thought about having one more year of being her plaything. Right as she greeted him cheerfully, Asahi snapped a photo despite his protest, and Rio decided he'd keep playing along until she finally made real friends. Rio sat alone in his room, staring at his April career path survey. Under first choice he had written nothing but the name of his school. A hand reached over his shoulder and snatched the survey away. Asahi had let herself into his room again. Asahi grinned, calling him replaced after spotting his senpai Yuta with a girlfriend. Rio snapped back that he hadn't been replaced by anyone. Asahi was introduced as his junior and childhood friend, a girl he described plainly as a brat, at the clubroom. Asahi read over his shoulder again, asking what he had been looking at. Rio pulled the paper back, annoyed that she kept bothering him about everything. Asahi spotted the name Maizuba University on his form and gasped, calling it a famous prestigious school in Tokyo. Rio brushed off the reaction, confirming it was correct. Asahi insisted a place like that was reserved for people who were cool, stylish, and glamorous, clearly doubting he belonged there. Rio stated plainly that he intended to go to a good university and earn a good salary. Irritated, Rio challenged her with a probability question involving 2 dice. Asahi answered confidently, but got it wrong. The correct answer was 2. Asahi accused him of tricking her, insisting the answer was 1 instead. Rio reminded her that a repeated pair still counted as 1 outcome. Asahi stuck her tongue out and called him a dumbass, refusing to admit defeat. She brushed off her mistake, claiming even primary schoolers could solve it, and telling him to stop nitpicking. Rio then pulled out her actual math test, scored 33 points. He asked how she even got into the school, hinting she must have cheated. Asahi claimed she had just been feeling sick that day. Rio set up another dice problem, asking the chance of both dice landing on the same number. Asahi declared it easy and got to work confident as ever. She tried solving it manually, without using any formula. Rio mocked her method, calling it a middle school level question and asking how many times she planned to keep failing. Later results from a school-wide exam came in. Rio had placed second out of 260 students. He shouted, refusing to let anyone underestimate his ranking. Asahi patted his head, admitting that with someone like him, constant teaching was the only way she would ever learn. Rio reminded Asahi that she had never been good at studying and warned her that falling behind now would make things tough later. Asahi stood silent, listening. Rio pressed further, asking why she had gone out of her way to attend his school, telling her she should have picked a lower level one instead. Asahi finally admitted the reason. She had wanted to go to the same place as him. Her eyes welled up with tears as she said it, catching Rio off guard. He asked if that meant she had followed him and forced her way into the school, despite struggling with her studies, denying it so strongly only to admit the truth now. Rio leaned in and asked just how much she wanted to be together with him. Asahi's face flushed red at the question. She smacked him and shouted that he was wrong, accusing him of jumping to his own conclusions. Ryo explained it was simply convenient in a lot of ways, insisting there was no deeper meaning behind it. She reminded him he still had to retake his test. Ryo brushed her off, telling her to hurry up and sit down, instead of asking if he was even listening. Ryo called her an idiot, and she immediately snapped back, warning him never to say that word to her again. As they sat together studying, Ryo held up a textbook and muttered to himself that she wasn't cute at all, quickly dismissing the thought. Later, Asahi stood in front of the school results board, checking her ranking. Seeing her name still in first place, she sighed and called it boring. Ryo stood in the hallway when Miyazono approached and asked to speak with him for a moment, catching him off guard. Classmates around them whispered in confusion, wondering what the school's top two rivals could possibly want with each other. Miyazono asked how long he planned to keep her waiting, then admitted she expected him to beat her on the exam this time. The result had left her disappointed. She leaned in close and asked if he really hated losing that much. Ryo snapped back that it infuriated him every single time. Miyazono shot back that she hated losing too. She called him boring and said his grades were none of her business. He muttered under his breath that he'd never admit he actually cared, since it would sound too lame. The results board showed Ryo ranked first and Miyazono second. She recalled the one time she had beaten him, back in their first year, and how excited she'd felt. Ryo, flustered, asked how she knew so much about him. Miyazono pointed out he ran the Modern Culture Exchange Club but hadn't filed a single activity report. Walking beside him, she proposed a deal. If he lost to her on the next midterm, his club would be shut down. Classmates watched the two of them together with disbelief, speculating that Miyazono seemed like exactly the type another boy. Miyazono took hold of his collar, pulling him close. She declared she would do whatever he asked if she lost, leaving him stunned. Ryo stared back at her, caught completely off guard by the offer. His eyes dropped for a moment before he asked what she meant. Nervous, he swallowed hard. Miyazono suggested it could be anything, like buying her lunch or making a ridiculous face. She teased him, asking if he had been imagining something inappropriate. He denied it immediately. Alone, Ryo admitted to himself that he had been losing to Miyazono in study sessions, and now felt he was losing here too. He declared he would accept her challenge, refusing to back down without a fight. She agreed. He insisted this was about pride and protecting his otaku lifestyle, adding he wasn't interested in any girl who wasn't his favorite fictional character. She teased that his eyes had drifted to her chest anyway, since biology made that unavoidable. He agreed, red-faced. Miyazono teased that he was clearly the quiet pervy type, leaving Ryo groaning in embarrassment. She tugged her collar shut, telling him to close it up if he didn't want people looking. A voice called out, later, as someone left the room, and Asahi lingered behind, flustered. She admitted, red-faced, that he was pretty interesting. Alone, Ryo panicked over what he'd just done, insisting his reaction was pure reflex whenever Asahi got under his skin. He found Asahi sitting outside, startled to see her there. She stayed quiet, clutching her bag, clearly bothered. A senior confronted Ryo, accusing him of getting cozy with another girl, and grinning like an idiot. Asahi stepped in, challenging her senpai to a match of her own. She declared the loser would have to do whatever the winner asked. Ryo declared that whoever lost their battles would have to do whatever the winner said. Asahi turned around sharply and told him the terms didn't matter, since he was doing it either way. Asahi shoved a finger toward his face, cutting off his objection, and demanded he keep his schedule clear after school. At the arcade, Asahi announced the rules. Best of 3 matches. Ryo trailed behind her, irritated, thinking to himself that she was, as usual, resigned. Ryo decided to go along with her for a while, silently blaming her love of games for dragging him into this. Before he could ask if she was any good, Asahi cranked the difficulty to extreme, grinning with total confidence and declaring herself great at the game. The drums thundered as Asahi's hands moved in a blur, leaving Ryo stunned at her speed while he struggled to keep up on his own set. The results came in. Asahi had won by a landslide, while Ryo admitted, relieved that she'd had him worried for a second. Asahi's expression twisted with tears welling up, catching Ryo completely off guard. He panicked and dragged her away by the hand, insisting they move on to the next round, while nearby girls whispered that he'd made her cry. The second match was a shooting game. Asahi opened fire wildly, screaming, while Ryo tried to calm her down and quietly admitted to himself he might lose this one, just to avoid her sobbing again. The game ended. Ryo's score somehow beat hers, and Asahi asked, confused, if he wasn't supposed to be good at these games. He shrugged it off, saying it didn't matter. Asahi smirked, taunting him with the gun still in hand, calling him a loser. Surrounded by teasing voices, Ryo muttered that his patience had officially run out. The third and final match was racing. Ryo vowed to crush her this time. But Asahi innocently asked which pedal was the accelerator, throwing him off guard. Confident he had this locked in, Ryo taunted her as the race began, certain there was no way he could lose to a beginner. Asahi smugly reminded him that he was the one about to be sorry. She threw items to knock him around every time he took the lead, needling him about staying ahead. Furious at her growing cockiness, Ryo vowed not to let her get away with it. Gripping the wheel, he pulled out his trump card for a guaranteed win. Asahi accused him of cheating with a shortcut, but Ryo insisted it was simply technique, leaving her sputtering in disbelief. Ryo shouted for Asahi to let go as she clung to the steering wheel, refusing to accept his declared victory. She screamed that he couldn't do this, clawing at his arm while he tried to pry himself free. Tears welled in her eyes as she begged him to wait, still insisting he couldn't just claim the win like that. Ryo froze, caught off guard by her crying, his own face flushing red as he hesitated with his hand still on the wheel. They left the arcade together afterward, walking side by side toward the station in silence. Asahi called out to him teasingly, and Ryo snapped at himself internally, annoyed that he'd gotten flustered over someone like her. She simply grinned, satisfied, declaring the day's win hers, walking ahead of him. Asahi remarked that the outing had felt like a date and asked if he'd had fun. She smiled contentedly, sipping her drink beside him without waiting for an answer. Ryo admitted to himself that today might have been his total defeat, but Asahi quickly backtracked, insisting it wasn't a date, and that she'd only been keeping him company. She then declared she wanted him to become her slave, before catching herself and trailing off, leaving him to ask what she actually wanted him to do. Asahi said she'd keep her request a secret for now, saving it for when it truly mattered, brushing off his demand to explain immediately. She turned to him with a knowing smile, addressing him by name and warning that she'd have to make him take her seriously. Inside the Modern Culture Exchange Club room, Ryo argued with his glasses, wearing friend Sota over weekend plans. Their third friend Ryo flatly refused both offers. Ryo declared he needed to attend a store-in meetup instead, leaving the other two stunned that he was choosing something else entirely. Ryo reminded them a test was coming up and he couldn't afford to slack off on studying, catching the others off guard since it was Golden Week. Ryo muttered to himself that he still hadn't told his friends about a certain bet, while Sota pointed out that Ryo always ranked second in class. The two friends grabbed onto Ryo, urging him to forget studying and figure out his holiday plans with them instead. One friend tried bribing him with yakiniku, while the other tempted him with news of a favorite author's new book release, each trying to win him over. The two bickered over which was better, book releases or the appeal of real girls, while Ryo sat between them looking unimpressed by their squabble. Summonon spotted Ryo through the door, still buried in his studying. He wondered privately if he could sneak away for just one day. Council members Karen and another girl walked in, mentioning a scheduled match with Ryo that caught the boys off guard. Karen explained she had come to clean out the clubroom, surprising Ryo, and confusing the others about what she meant. Karen revealed the shocking truth. The Modern Culture Exchange Club was being disbanded entirely. Kageyama's friends scrambled to explain, revealing a bet where scoring higher on the next test would let the club survive. Karen looked through the club's shelves, disappointed to find comics instead of textbooks. She ordered her attendant, Sumuji, to dispose of the entire bookshelf, ignoring the boys' panicked protests. She continued targeting board games and magazines, calling out inappropriate items despite the boys' attempts to stop her. Karen kept ordering anything distracting be thrown out, leaving Ryo horrified as the clubroom was stripped bare. Karen scolded them for barging in, insisting she was studying fine without their interference. She brought up seeing him near an arcade despite his claims of meetups and concerts, catching him off guard. Karen declared he wasn't even her real opponent given his recent behavior. Ryo stood silent, quietly admitting to himself that he was being looked down on. Karen suggested deleting an app from Kageyama's phone, calling it unnecessary along with everything else on his screen. The others protested that the app held Ryo's favorite character, calling her plan too harsh, but Karen insisted that was exactly why it needed to go. Chaos broke out as the boys scrambled to stop her, accusing her of overstepping her authority as president and going too far with her demands. In the commotion, Ryo leaned in close over Karen at the desk, catching her off guard as their faces nearly touched. The onlookers froze in shock while Ryo pinned her attention completely, the room falling into stunned silence. He accused her of acting childish over a mere game, and she stammered back, asking if he was actually angry. As she flinched, his hand reached toward her phone, moving to remove the app despite her protest. He confirmed it was gone, deleting the game right in front of her. He told her she had brought this seriousness on herself, leaving her stunned and speechless. He warned her to prepare herself, his expression sharp and confident. The others asked if Riko's data was safe, and he assured them everything was fine. Karen broke down in relief, explaining that her data was backed up in the cloud and only meant for the test. The group praised Kageyama's resolve, surprised that he had sealed away his own game, while Karen sat flustered and overwhelmed by what had just happened. The clubroom door remained marked with its sign, a reminder that only 2 weeks stood before the test and that things had suddenly turned serious. Ryo waited alone at the bus stop, under heavy rain, hoping to get home fast to study. Unaware his ride was still 30 minutes away, Kohinata appeared under her umbrella, teasing him with a sly grin and offering to walk him home. She insisted she only called out because he looked pitiful standing there, but a sudden gust of wind sent rain slashing sideways between them. A car pulled up beside the stop, and a girl inside apologized for her grandfather's reckless driving as it splashed them both. The girl turned out to be Miyazono, and she froze in surprise recognizing Ryo through the downpour. The three ended up squeezed together in the back seat, Ryo sandwiched between the girls, visibly uncomfortable with how close they sat. Miyazono explained she got picked up from school often since her family had grown well off, handing him a cloth for the mess. Kohinata recalled the day Miyazono had brought Ryo to the student council room, watching quietly as she offered him something then too. Back in the present car ride, Kohinata's expression tightened as Miyazono fussed over Ryo again. Miyazono gently wiped his soaked face with a cloth. Worried he might catch a cold from the rain, Kohinata noticed how sweet Miyazono smelled, and how kind she seemed. Feeling suddenly out of place, the girls exchanged competitive banter about grades and games, and Kohinata realized just how sharp Miyazono truly was. Watching her composed posture, Kohinata silently admitted Miyazono was mature, beautiful, and clearly fit her role as student council president. Her hands clenched as doubt crept in, wondering exactly what kind of relationship Ryo shared with someone so accomplished. Just then, Kohinata sneezed suddenly, startling both of them in the cramped seat. Ryo snapped at her for acting tough, despite clearly being cold, calling her out for still behaving like a kid. Miyazono studied the pair quietly, remembering it was this same girl who had once left the arcade together with Ryo. When Kohinata refused help stubbornly, Ryo pulled off his own jacket and offered it to her without hesitation. She stared up at him, cheeks resting in her hands, caught off guard by the sudden gesture. Ryo quickly denied anything romantic, insisting they were only childhood friends, though Miyazono's knowing smile suggested she saw right through him. Ryo laughed off Miyazono's teasing about needing a babysitter, insisting Kohinata had always been clumsy since they were kids. While the two girls bickered beside him, Kohinata stayed quiet, watching the rain pour outside the car as her thoughts churned. Miyazono's grandfather apologized again for his reckless driving, and Ryo thanked them for the ride, calling them lifesavers. Kohinata thanked Miyazono for the ride as well, her smile carrying a sharp edge beneath the politeness. Miyazono reminded Ryo she wouldn't lose their upcoming match, and he agreed to see her after the break, leaving Kohinata watching silently. As they stepped out under their umbrellas, Kohinata pulled Ryo close without warning. She whispered that they should fight fair and square, her face inches from his. Kohinata's smile turned smug as Ryo froze completely, stunned by what had just happened between them. The two lingered close together under the umbrella near the car while Miyazono stood apart watching from a distance. Miyazono said her goodbyes and left, muttering about how strange the whole scene was, while Ryo stood frozen, insisting he didn't need to react that way. Kohinata walked off in a daze, cheeks burning as she realized what had just happened was a kiss, leaving the moment marked to be continued. Ryo and Asahi ended up at school at night during Golden Week to retrieve homework left behind in the classroom. Walking through the dark hallway, Asahi trembled with fear, though she refused to admit it. She insisted it was just the wind and urged Ryo to hurry up and keep moving, her voice shaking despite her forced composure. Ryo stopped, turned back, and held his hand out to her without a word, offering it as a way to steady her nerves. He told her to stop pretending to be tough when she was clearly terrified. Asahi snapped that she wasn't scared at all and refused his hand. Ryo pointed out that she was the one actually afraid of ghosts, calling out her bluff directly. He teased her further, calling her a little kid underneath the tough act. Asahi denied believing in ghosts at all, brushing off his words, changing her approach. Asahi smirked and offered to hold his hand instead, framing it as if she were doing him a favor. As she clung to his arm, she needled him about never having held a girl's hand before, catching him off guard. Their two younger schoolmates watching nearby teased Ryo about how lucky he was to have a cute girl offer her hand, wondering if his heart was racing. Ryo brushed it off, claiming holding hands meant nothing to him, but Asahi turned furious, snapping that no one would ever want to hold hands with someone like him. A separate scene interrupted the moment. Rio called out to Asahi over the phone, unaware of what was unfolding on her end. Back in the hallway, Asahi doubled down, declaring she didn't want to hold his hand either, her face flushed with anger. She kept going, mocking his hand as sweaty and gross, and insisted she never wanted to come with him in the first place. Rio shot back that she could go alone, then telling her not to come screaming if a ghost showed up. He turned away, visibly annoyed, despite having been worried about her moments earlier. As Asahi stormed off down the hallway, Rio noted to himself how unusually foul her mood had become. Walking alone, Asahi muttered that she'd be fine without him, insisting ghosts were stupid and that she didn't need him around. Just then, a horror-movie-like figure loomed in the hallway behind her, its face split and decayed, watching silently as she walked further from Rio. The moment she noticed it, Asahi froze in terror before slapping her hand over her own mouth to stifle a scream, her whole body reacting in shock. Rio suddenly appeared behind her, grabbing her hand and stating that he knew she'd get scared being alone, proving his earlier point, with their hands now firmly linked. Rio remarked dryly that this wasn't a video game, while Asahi, still shaken, weakly insisted there was no such thing as ghosts as he led her away. With their hands still locked together, Asahi pointed out that Rio was sweating. He shot back that she was too, both of them refusing to back down from the jab. Rio sighed, noting she was still acting the same as always. Asahi shook her head furiously, insisting she wasn't being clingy and demanding he let go since he was gross. Rio grinned and threatened to pull her even closer if she kept talking like that, giving her hand a yank that caught her completely off guard. He asked if she'd actually be scared if he let go. Asahi called him a dummy and told him not to touch her, even as he traced small circles against her palm, drawing out flustered protests. The teasing pushed further until Asahi's expression twisted into pure exasperation. She snapped at him to stop, grabbing his hand back before he could pull away. Left alone with her thoughts, Asahi quietly admitted to herself that she didn't want him to let go. Walking beside him, she finally said, "Please," in a small voice, holding onto his hand as they continued through the hallway. Rio noticed the shift in her, awkwardly pointing out that she'd been complaining about it the whole time, and now suddenly wanted to hold on. Asahi stumbled over her words, unable to explain the sudden change. Rio walked her onward, muttering that if she was scared, she should have just said so from the beginning, instead of putting up a fight over it. Later, with the test looming the next day, Asahi complained that he shouldn't confuse her right before something so important, still holding his hand as they walked. A sudden sliding sound startled her, making her flinch and drop something with a clatter. Rio glanced over, caught off guard by her reaction. The tension broke into laughter between them, but their moment was interrupted by a scream and heavy footsteps echoing from the rooftop above, causing Ryo's expression to shift into alarm. The next day, with only one day left until the test, Asahi ran into her friend Yuta, who asked if he'd managed to find his own homework. Midterm rankings were being posted at school. Ryo had made a bet: if he lost to Karen Miyazono, the Modern Culture Exchange Club would be disbanded. Ryo reminded himself of everything he had done to prepare. He had studied hard and even held off on hanging out and gaming during Golden Week. Nothing was left now but to trust in his effort. The hallway buzzed as students crowded around the posted results. Rio approached with his club members beside him. The crowd murmured in disbelief that Miyazono had lost. Rio stood frozen, staring at his own name at the top of the list. His club members erupted in celebration, cheering and telling him to look at what he'd done. Rio turned to find Asahi, grinning and pointing out her defeat. Asahi stood off to the side, flustered and biting back her frustration as Rio watched her reaction. She accused him of taunting her and asked if he enjoyed watching her lose. Rio shot back that it was frustrating for her, wasn't it? Rio reminded her of their deal. Since he'd won, the club would be allowed to stay, and she now owed him one command: whatever he wanted. Asahi read the club application form he handed her and reacted in shock, repeating back that he wanted her to become vice president of the Modern Culture Exchange Club. Annoyed, she accused him of just wanting to use her name for the club's sake. Rio explained that having student council president Miyazono listed as a member meant no one would ever question shutting the club down again. Startled, Rio stammered as she leaned toward him. Asahi reminded him that since he'd won, she now had to do anything he asked, and there had to be something else he wanted. Shay began loosening her ribbon, asking if he wasn't wasting his one real chance to make her do something. Ryo's face burned as he thought that being able to order her around like this was a once-in-a-lifetime chance. He noted she was still teasing him despite having lost. Regaining his composure, he told her that losers should act like losers and feel properly frustrated. That was all he wanted from her. Filling out the club form, he admitted he was frustrated but also happy at the same time. He explained that her joining meant she had finally taken him seriously as a rival for the first time. The two studied each other's faces in the quiet aftermath, neither saying anything more. The classroom door creaked open. Ryo glanced up, sensing the strange shift in the room's atmosphere. A club member yanked the door open in a panic, startling everyone. He addressed Ryo directly, catching his attention. Asahi appeared in the doorway, smiling nervously and laughing off the tension. A club member questioned why Ryo and Asahi had been hiding in the locker, saying he'd heard voices and assumed someone was coming into the room. Ryo announced to the room that Asahi had officially become the club's vice president. The girl beside him, Kohinata, remarked that she'd already overheard as much, and suggested they all do their best together. One of the club members, surprised, mentioned he'd simply assumed Asahi was already a member, since she was always in the room. Ryo added that Asahi didn't really have nerdy hobbies and wasn't interested in that kind of thing either. Kohinata turned to Asahi, surprised, saying she'd actually read quite a bit of manga herself and found that unexpected. Irritated at being talked about like she wasn't there, Asahi's expression darkened as Ryo grinned beside her. Unaware of her building frustration, Ryo casually asked Asahi what she'd actually needed from him in the first place. When she didn't answer right away, he asked again. More pointedly. Without warning, Asahi's eyes welled up, startling both Ryo and Kohinata, who reacted with confusion at her sudden change. Kohinata asked if she was okay and whether she'd bumped into something. Ryu, alarmed, asked why she was suddenly crying. Asahi grabbed onto Ryo's blazer and declared that she was joining the club too. Kohinata looked on, stunned, while Ryo stood frozen in shock at the announcement. Asahi tightened her grip on his jacket as the room fell into confusion. Ryu, caught between the two girls, could only wonder what would become of his once peaceful. Ryo sat with a girl reviewing something on her phone, unaware that Asahi was watching him from a distance with a tense expression, while elsewhere his friends teased him over a bowl of noodles. Ryo noticed Asahi had been acting strange lately, following him around in ways she thought he hadn't caught on to. Asahi suddenly announced to her friends that she was joining the same club as Ryu, swinging between awkward bursts of energy and sudden tears, leaving the people around her confused about her mood. Aya Sr. asked Ryo to handle the club's activity report, and as he agreed, he wondered privately what Asahi was really scheming. Walking through the hallway, Ryo caught Asahi hiding just around the corner and called her out directly, telling her he knew she was there. The two walked together afterward in an uneasy silence, both avoiding conversation. Ryo muttered to himself that things like that were normal for people their age, brushing off whatever thought had crossed his mind. Breaking the quiet, Asahi asked him bluntly whether he had ever kissed anyone before. Startled, Ryo snapped back, asking why she'd bring up something so strange, while Asahi and another girl pressed him further, asking if he was curious how it felt and daring him to try. Ryo questioned inwardly whether she'd been chasing him around just to mock him. As Asahi leaned in with a teasing smile, asking if she should give him the chance to kiss her. Caught off guard by her question, Ryo answered flatly that he had kissed before. He added that it was just a kiss, nothing more. But as they walked on afterward, the silence between them grew heavier. Asahi appeared visibly shaken by his answer, too surprised to respond right away. Recovering, she challenged him directly, asking him to try kissing her too. Ryo pulled back, accusing her of teasing people too much, and telling her to get a grip, while Asahi insisted that since he'd called it just a kiss, it should mean nothing to him. Leaning close, she told him plainly that this was an order. Asahi reminded him he hadn't forgotten the bet they'd made earlier, and that the loser had to obey the winner's request, revealing that this was the price of that bet. Ryo hesitated, asking why he would kiss Asahi, questioning what she was even thinking as the two stood close together in the empty stairwell. Asahi softened her tone, asking him to show her that he was still the older one between them, if only for a moment. Giving in, Ryo agreed it was fine since it was an order, gripping her hand tightly as he admitted that she made fun of him every single time. Ryo pulled Asahi close, telling her that today, of all days, he would make her understand. He leaned in slowly, and Asahi's composure broke as she let out a startled sound, caught off guard by how close he'd gotten. Panicking, she flailed and cried out for him to wait, asking if he was really serious, but Ryo kept holding her in place, refusing to stop. Overwhelmed, Asahi admitted her heart wasn't ready for this, her face flushed and her hands trembling in front of her. Ryo suddenly pulled back, confessing loudly that he'd never actually kissed anyone before, and that his earlier claim had been a lie, only for Asahi to shove him away in response. Shaken, he asked her if she was happy now, telling her to go ahead and mock him for it if she wanted. Asahi stood quietly for a moment before asking if he was serious, and Ryu, still flustered, confirmed it, and asked what she planned to do about it. A knowing smile crossed her face as she recalled chasing him around, and asked what he'd really wanted from it, teasing him gently as he turned away, embarrassed by her reaction. Startled by her sudden closeness, Rio let out a surprised sound as Asahi spun around cheerfully, declaring that the matter was already resolved. Left standing there, Rio muttered to himself that she was impossible to understand, shaking his head at how unpredictable she truly was. Rio stood before the club, declaring that anything short of first place was unacceptable. The members exchanged glances, unsure why they had to follow the president's orders, while Miyazono admitted she was fired up. The event was the Interclub Obstacle Relay, made up of 6 stages: hurdles, army crawl, bread race, balance beam, scavenger hunt, and anchor. Rio, the club president, watched from the sidelines as the team gathered at the track, forced into competing simply because their numbers had crossed the 5-member threshold. Miyazono and Asahi teased Rio together, promising him a reward if he performed well, then immediately mocking him, warning he might fail miserably as anchor. Rio scolded the 2 girls, but they only leaned in closer, daring him to kiss them and prove he was truly older. He shut his eyes, frustrated at how easily they got under his skin. The team ran through the course individually. First, Kohinata screamed in panic as they geared up to attempt it together, and Rio silently mourned how far his quiet otaku life now felt. During the balance beam segment, Kohinata lost her footing again and hit the ground. Asahi rushed to check on her, calling out her name in concern. Kneeling beside her, Asahi asked if she was hurt. Kohinata insisted she was fine, though her strained expression said otherwise. Rio suggested they attempt a full run through. Kohinata agreed, but the run collapsed almost immediately as the baton was dropped, and the runners crashed into each other mid-course. The chaos escalated. Someone's glasses cracked underfoot, another club member yelped in pain, and Rio shouted a warning to Asahi just as she barreled toward the pack. Asahi froze, overwhelmed, repeating apologies over and over, shaking as the weight of the failed run settled on her. The other members quickly stepped in, brushing off the mistakes and apologizing themselves, while one teammate noted that Asahi was simply bad at fitting into group activities. Simone proposed ending practice early for the day. Rio refused, insisting they figure out what to do instead of giving up. Asahi pulled at his collar, telling him there was no point in continuing like this, her exhaustion showing plainly on her face. The team disbanded for the day. Kohinata apologized once more. One member left to get his broken glasses fixed, and Asahi announced she needed to stop by the student council office, watching her walk ahead. Rio realized just how severe Asahi's social anxiety actually was. He reflected that she had rarely joined any group on her own, and he wished she could feel like she truly belonged now that she finally had. Noticing how down she looked on the way home, Rio caught up and told her he was heading home too, walking silently beside her. Asahi startled to find him standing right outside her house demanding to know what he was doing there. She pointed sharply, calling him an idiot and telling him to get down before he fell and got eaten by crocodiles, scolding him for scaring her like that. Balanced on the wall's edge, Asahi told herself that if she could hold her footing all the way to the corner, she would succeed at anything she wanted. She called it a good luck ritual. She admitted that nervousness struck her out of nowhere, ruining even the simplest tasks, especially when she worried about causing trouble for everyone around her. She confessed she couldn't look anyone in the eye or speak properly whenever she feared she was being a burden or getting in the way. Rio simply said her name, watching her. Squeezing her hands together, she said she still wanted to get better. She listed everyone she felt she owed something to paying Kigo back for his glasses, wondering if Miyazono was angry with her. She told Rio she wanted to be able to make friends, to reach a point where she could look anyone in the eye, speak to them properly, apologize, and thank them without fear. Pressing her face into her scarf, she said that once they graduated, school wouldn't be fun anymore. Rio thought to himself that this girl, normally such a brat, saying something so sincere out of nowhere, was completely unfair. Asahi told him that if he used this chance to fix her anxiety, he wouldn't have to spend his high school life alone. Rio agreed. She climbed onto the wall, declaring it her good luck ritual and insisting she'd come down only after crossing the whole length of it. Rio warned her it was dangerous and told her to get down, but she refused, insisting she wouldn't fall. Partway across, she lost her footing, blushing and panicking as her skirt flipped up, exposing more than she wanted. She crashed down directly on top of him, laughing through the fall while frantically telling him not to look. Rio admitted to himself that he'd been worried, relieved she seemed fine, though Asahi immediately complained that he was heavy and told him to get off her. The baton drops during practice, clattering across the track. Kohinata flinches back in surprise as Asahi rushes to catch it, calling out an apology. A quiet moment settles over the group. One of the boys watches the scene with a tired, unreadable expression, while Asahi presses her fingers to her lips, lost in thought. The team regroups to figure out what went wrong. One member suggests starting the relay order from scratch. The suggestion catches everyone off guard. A calm, composed girl steps in and explains her reasoning. She believes Kohinata is most nervous about receiving the baton from her specifically. With the new lineup settled, the team runs through the order one more time. Asahi stands at the front of the group tense, while the others wait behind her. Before the run begins, Asahi suddenly holds up her hands, stopping everyone. She has something she needs to say. The senior beside her notices and reaches out toward her. Attention shifts fully to Asahi. A senior turns to look at her directly, startled by the sudden focus on her, gripping her sleeve nervously. Asahi bows low, apologizing to the team for holding everyone back with her mistakes. Determined to make things right, Asahi turns to Yuta Senpai first, apologizing for never replying to him properly, despite how often he talks to her. She turns to Miyazono Senpai next, apologizing for giving her a bad attitude throughout their time training together. Asahi admits she wishes she could be different, cheerful like Yuta Senpai, or calm and composed like Kigo Senpai. Her thoughts spiral further. She wishes she were grown up and dependable or pretty, with a good sense of style, unlike herself. Despite everything, Asahi pushes through, declaring that even being the way she is, she wants to become friends with everyone and promises to keep trying her best. The team falls completely silent, stunned by her honesty, panicked by their reaction. Asahi backtracks, telling them to ignore her if it was too much. Mortified that she said something strange, the baton drops again with a soft thud. Miyazono Senpai steps toward Asahi, who looks up at her, uncertain what is about to happen. Without warning, Miyazono pulls Asahi into a tight hug, gushing about how unbearably cute she is. Asahi freezes, wide-eyed, while the boys behind them react in shock. Miyazono clarifies through the embrace. She was just reflecting on how she'd been the one intimidating Asahi all along, and insists she was never mad at her. Miyazono confesses her own insecurity, admitting she is always seen as unapproachable, and that people tend to keep their distance from her. Touched, Asahi says Miyazono is the first person to call her cute without being scared of her, hugging her back tightly despite her muffled protests. Ryo interrupts with mock concern, warning that Asahi is going to suffocate, while the other girl pulls back with a cheerful apology, the tension finally broken. Keigo waves off her worry about his glasses, assuring her they're still under warranty. Ryo chimes in that he wants to be friends too. Ryo points out that everyone said they wanted to be friends with her, asking Asahi if that isn't great news. The team suggests doing a cheer to celebrate their improved teamwork, tossing around ideas about who should lead it. Their hands stack together in the center of the circle as they call out for the Modern Culture Exchange Club, shouting victory in unison. The team pumps their fists in celebration. As the energy settles, Ryo pulls Asahi aside to talk, alone with him for a moment. Asahi thanks him quietly. He asks what she wants to say, and she struggles to get the words out. Ryo wraps his jacket around her shoulders as she finally manages to thank him for everything. He teases her, saying she'd be so much cuter if she stayed this honest all the time, planting a light kiss as she yelps in surprise. Watching quietly from the side, Kohinata admits to herself that she is starting to understand a little of why Asahi affects him the way she does. Asahi shouts at him not to call her cute, insisting it is embarrassing, while Ryo just watches her with a small, knowing smile. The sports festival reached its next event as every club gathered at the field for the inter-club obstacle relay. Kohinata tried to reassure the group that everything would be fine, though one of the girls beside him admitted she was too nervous to relax. Off to the side, two girls prepared for their leg of the relay. One worried aloud about botching the baton pass, and the other encouraged her. Watching the practice runs, the group admitted the festival wasn't turning out so bad after all, even if nerves were still written across their faces. One of the senior girls spoke with quiet determination, calling it her first and last sports festival with her upperclassmen, and vowing to win it for them as a parting gift. Alone for a moment, the anchor runner steeled himself, promising to give his best for Asahi's sake, certain that a win would become a treasured memory for her. The relay's structure was laid out: baton passes, hurdles, a crawl, under netting, a balance beam crossing, a bread eating race, and finally a scavenger hunt for the anchor. Tension flickered across the runners' faces as the call to start echoed through the field. The whistle sounded, and the first wave of runners launched off the line together, hurdles waiting ahead as the crowd watched the pack surge forward. From the sidelines, cheerleaders shouted encouragement toward Yuta, who braced himself as he approached the hurdles. One runner tore ahead, drawing gasps from the crowd as Lane 3 pulled into the lead, While some girls filmed the race for laughs, Keigo pushed through the run, frustrated at how much attention he was drawing to himself. Crawling beneath the netting, one runner begged not to be looked at, muttering that this humiliation was exactly why he disliked working with girls. Despite the struggle, praise came his way for the effort, and the baton successfully reached the next runner, who took off breathless but determined. A sudden announcement stirred surprise as San was called out as the next runner to take the baton. The crowd's attention shifted again as the club president, Karen Miyazono, was introduced to thunderous reaction. Karen's beauty and grace, mid-run, left onlookers dazzled, showering her with praise as she moved effortlessly through her leg of the relay. Karen maintained the lead and passed the baton onward, though a brief scramble followed as it reached Chan catching her off guard. Teammates rallied around her, shouting encouragement as she readied herself, relieved that things were going well so far. Determined to protect the lead her seniors had built, she pressed forward onto the balance beam, focused entirely on keeping the team's advantage alive. On the balance beam, the runner pressed forward while the announcer called out that others were catching up. Just one task remained, passing the baton to Kageyama. Senpai, without warning, she tripped and fell to the ground as the runners behind surged past. Her teammates froze, stunned expressions spreading across their faces at the sight. Panic rippled through the group as the baton reached the anchors. The team that had held first place had fallen behind, and the other runners were closing the gap fast. Lying there, she spiraled into self-doubt, thinking of how the seniors' hard work was about to go to waste. She questioned herself, wondering if she had failed everyone again. Old memories surfaced of being excluded by other girls, who once said she ruined the group's mood and didn't want her around. A hand reached for hers. Ryo asked if she had forgotten about Asahi, pulling her back to her feet without hesitation. Startled, she looked up as Ryo gripped the baton and announced he had arrived, revealing he used to run track back in middle school. The crowd rallied behind him as it was explained that the anchor would need to complete a full lap, and everyone cheered him onward. A memory flickered back to childhood, of Asahi being invited to play dodgeball at the park while the other kids walked ahead. She recalled that it was always just her left standing alone. As Ryo ran ahead with the baton, his voice cut through, admitting that he might end up liking her. At the final stretch, each anchor took part in a scavenger hunt, drawing prompts for items they needed to find. The paper revealed his prompt: he needed someone she liked. Holding the note, Ryo paused in thought before turning back toward the girls. Asahi, Karen, and another teammate all reacted with visible tension. Ryo stands at the front of the class as the borrowing race theme is revealed to everyone. The card he picked demands something unexpected: someone you like. He brushes off a teammate's teasing remark with an easy smile, insisting it won't affect him. The three girls nearby react the moment they hear the word "like" spoken aloud. Their expressions freeze, each one caught off guard, unsure if the moment concerns them. The race begins and chaos breaks out on the track. Runners scramble to find their assigned items while the crowd murmurs, noticing that Ryo isn't moving. Whispers spread through the crowd as classmates try to guess what his item could be. The final stretch arrives. Ryo suddenly bolts forward with startling speed, catching his teammates off guard as they call out in surprise. Determination takes over his face as he pushes through exhaustion, sprinting past other competitors. His teammates cheer wildly from the sidelines, urging him on as he closes the gap with the runner ahead of him. A memory flickers through his mind, an image of a senpai he admires. Her face lingers there as he keeps running, breath ragged. He grits his teeth, thinking that dealing with her tears again would be unbearable, using that thought to push himself faster. His expression twists with strain as he closes in on the leader, refusing to fall behind. Now, with a final burst, he overtakes the front runner completely, leaving the crowd stunned by the sudden reversal. He crosses the finish line first, and the stadium erupts. Everyone waits as officials prepare to reveal his borrowed item, the tension rising with every second. He reveals the truth on his phone screen, a picture of an idol named Saren, admitting she is the one he likes. The crowd reacts loudly to his declaration, but the announcement quickly shifts, revealing he has been disqualified for using an unapproved item. His teammates tease him about his obvious devotion to Saren, while one girl among them reacts with visible discomfort, holding back her own feelings. Students in the stands mock him further, calling his fixation embarrassing. Back near the equipment, classmates continue gossiping about his behavior, and one girl is accused of getting herself disqualified on purpose. She defends herself, insisting she only acted to keep another girl from feeling guilty after falling, denying any personal motive. Ryo asks if she truly has no one she likes. She admits it is partly true, but also confesses she still likes Siren, framing her choice as a gamble worth taking. Ryo denies any romantic interest when a friend brings up Kohinata, Sanan insisting there is nothing between them. He explains that he and Asahi are simply childhood friends stuck together out of habit, not romance. His friend presses further, asking why he is even bringing Asahi into the conversation, catching him off guard. A girl nearby watches the exchange with a knowing look. Ryo tries to shut the conversation down, admitting he is not comfortable discussing this kind of topic, leaving him with nothing else to say. He states plainly that he isn't particularly good with matters involving someone he likes or dating in general. The girl across from him smiles, claiming she has no interest in love herself, while another boy nearby laughs that hanging out with friends suits him far better. The moment is interrupted by an announcement calling the third-year boys to the tug-of-war, and Ryo rushes off, leaving the conversation behind. The girl reflects quietly, concluding that his true rival for attention isn't other girls, and it isn't Siren either. She calls whoever it really is a formidable enemy. Walking behind him, she smirks to herself, suggesting it could just as easily be Kageyama occupying his thoughts, needling him without him noticing. The crowd erupts as the tug-of-war ends, celebrating Miyazono. San's team, the Red Group, is declared the winner, closing the event on a triumphant note. Karen, captain of the archery club, released her arrow with practiced focus, striking the target dead center, watching from the sidelines. Ryo and his friends caught the impressive scene. Teammates crowded around Karen, thanking her and congratulating her on leading the team to victory in the tournament. Walking home afterward, Ryo scrolled through his phone while classmates asked Karen if she was really planning to quit archery despite her packed schedule. Karen managed everything at once, serving as student council president, keeping top grades, taking on the vice president role in the cultural exchange club. Ryo admitted to himself that Karen felt like someone from a completely different world, someone he kept running into without understanding why. Asahi had dragged Ryo along to watch the competition, and she teased him about it, joking that even he had shown up despite his usual reluctance. While waiting around, Ryo mentioned that Asahi had gone to the bathroom, prompting a friend to ask about Tsumugi. Karen approached with her equipment, sighing about her retirement from the sport. Ryo offered his congratulations on her championship win, and she thanked him simply. As leaves drifted around her, Karen reflected that her archery days were truly finished. Ryo flashed a peace sign, boasting that getting into Meiji University was basically guaranteed thanks to his recent top score on a test. Karen congratulated him warmly. Talking about the upcoming break, Ryo admitted he was looking forward to a relaxed summer, especially since he'd get to spend more time at events with Kigo. Karen added that spending summer vacation with friends sounded like a good idea, and Ryo agreed. A sudden gust of wind caught them off guard, messing up Karen's carefully styled hair. She groaned, realizing she'd have to fix it. While Ryo offered to carry her bag, Karen brushed off the offer, insisting she was fine holding her own luggage, though her expression stayed unreadable. Turning to Ryo, Karen held up her hair tie and asked if he would tie her hair up for her. Ryo groaned, telling her that provoking him wouldn't get her what she wanted. Karen pushed back, asking innocently why he couldn't just do something so simple. Karen teased further, wondering aloud if touching a girl's hair would be too much of a challenge for someone like Ryo. Frustrated, Ryo complained that he genuinely couldn't understand what was going on in her head, muttering that he wasn't her butler. Giving in, Ryo carefully gathered Karen's hair and began tying it up while she waited quietly. As he finished, Kageyama's face flushed slightly, admitting under his breath that he didn't mind doing it, while Karen's hair settled neatly back into place. Ryo noticed a few loose strands of hair caught near Karen's neck as he finished tying it up, and he reached out to brush them away. The sudden touch made Karen flinch and yelp, catching Ryo off guard as he quickly apologized for startling her. Flustered, Karen scolded him for touching her so suddenly without warning, calling him an idiot as her face flushed red. Ryo defended himself, insisting he wasn't trying to act like a pervert, and confirmed that her hair was finally done. As Karen prepared to head off on her own path, Ryo called out, asking her to pass along his regards to Kohinata. She agreed before turning to leave. Ryo caught up with the group and floated an idea, suggesting they all go somewhere together as a club excursion before he graduated. The group agreed it made sense, since this would be their final summer vacation of high school. Karen brought up a concern, wondering if Yuta would be able to join without needing to check with his girlfriend first. Despite the uncertainty, Karen admitted she was genuinely looking forward to the trip, smiling softly to herself as Ryo watched her reaction. Karen's inner thoughts surfaced, reflecting on how people always seemed to keep their distance from her, even though she struggled with things just like anyone else. Ryo thought to himself that he felt like he was finally getting to understand who Karen really was as a person, even if only a little. Nearby, Tsumugi watched quietly from behind a tree as the group reunited, with Asahi returning and announcing that the bathrooms had been packed. Watching the scene unfold, Sumuji's expression turned serious, as she muttered to herself that things were about to become a real issue. Ryo lay sprawled on his couch, phone in hand, scrolling through an empty feed. His birthday had landed on a Saturday, and not a single notification had come in. The calendar on the wall marked the date quietly, ignored by everyone else. His father's business trip had been extended again, leaving him alone in the house. A text came through about shampoo and souvenirs, nothing more. His friends had already celebrated his birthday early, days before, which only made the actual day feel emptier. The front door burst open without warning. Asahi walked in like she owned the place, startling him off the couch entirely. He snapped at her for barging in uninvited, but she brushed him off and reminded him she'd been coming to this house since their first year of middle school. She paused at the family altar, bowing her head toward the photo of his mother, who had passed away 9 years earlier. She greeted the portrait softly before turning back to him. Memories surfaced of their childhood, arguments over video games, Asahi dragging him outside to play, insisting he was bored anyway. 11 years of friendship, and nothing between them had really changed. Then he noticed the bag she was carrying. She held up a cake, declaring she'd come to celebrate with her pitiful, lonely senpai spending his birthday by himself. He asked if she'd finally noticed the date. She admitted her mother had been enthusiastic about the baking, and she'd only helped a little. He teased her for it, though he made clear he was grateful for the gesture. He remembered how his own mother used to bake him a cake every birthday when they were kids. Asahi mentioned that his mother had always loved baking too. Sitting together with forks in hand, he told her honestly that he was happy she'd come. He thanked her for trying her best in her own clumsy way, which earned him an annoyed look. Then she raised a fork toward him, calling his name. She held out a bite of cake and told him to say, "Ah." He refused, embarrassed, insisting he could feed himself. She only laughed harder at his reaction. She kept pushing the fork closer, reminding him he was 18 now, and telling him not to run away. She took a bite herself instead, calling him a damn brat and telling him not to get flustered over something so small, since he was supposed to be an adult. Now he admitted to himself she wasn't wrong, watching her enjoy the cake beside him. She reflected that she couldn't keep letting a junior push her around, especially now that she was 18 herself, determined. He reached for a piece of cake, telling her he was an adult too. He offered her a bite, asking if he was doing it right. She flinched, caught off guard. He held it out again, telling her to just eat it. She insisted she wasn't embarrassed at all, though her flustered face said otherwise. Ryo held the strawberry up, telling her to say, "Ah," the way she had teased him earlier. Asahi froze, caught completely off guard by the challenge. He pressed the point further, calling her out for chickening out and reminding her she was the one who'd started this whole thing. He admitted it was getting embarrassing for him too, but he wasn't backing down now. She leaned forward and took the bite anyway, her eyes fluttering shut as she accepted it from his fingers. Her lips closed around the fruit, and Ryo's expression tightened. A quiet sound escaped him as he watched her. The air between them shifted. Her cheeks flushed, her eyes glistening, and for a moment, neither of them said anything, the usual teasing replaced by something heavier. A crumb lingered near her mouth, and without thinking, Ryo reached out to wipe it away himself. She let out a small surprised sound at the touch. Sitting back, he stared at his own hand under the table, unable to understand the thoughts running through his head. He realized he'd never felt anything like this toward a childhood friend before. Meanwhile, Asahi scolded him for staring, insisting she wasn't being careless just because they were alone in the house. He picked up another strawberry, frustration flickering across his face. He couldn't believe he was feeling something this strange, and toward Asahi, an annoying junior he'd known his whole life. He held the fruit toward her again, and told her to open her mouth for one more bite. Her eyes went wide with shock at the request. Chaos broke out as she swatted the plate away, sending everything flying while she let out a startled scream. She smacked him across the face, calling him a pervert and a moron, her cheeks burning red with embarrassment. Left alone on the couch, cake smeared across the table, Ryo buried his face in his hands. Even turning 18, he thought. It was far too early to try acting like an adult. Ryo pressed a piece of candy against Asahi's lips and told her to open her mouth, flustered. She gave in and let him feed her, her face turning red as he watched with a satisfied grin. Asahi stood outside the Modern Culture Exchange Club room, replaying the moment in her head. Inside the club room, Ryo studied a small mirror in his hand, comparing his reflection to Asahi's face. Asahi walked into the room and greeted the members awkwardly. The moment she stepped through the door, one of the boys shouted that Siren had arrived, sending the whole club into an uproar. Ryo pulled out his phone and showed off a 10-pull gacha jackpot, drawing praise from the other members. Watching from the side, Asahi told herself she was the only one paying real attention to him. With Miyazono running late due to student council duties, Hinata asked if they should start the meeting without her. Asahi reacted with surprise when the topic of a trip came up. The club had summer vacation plans in the works, and a proposal for where to go was about to be discussed. Excited that this would be their first outing since the school trip, Asahi asked if Ryo was really coming along. Ryo bluntly stated he wasn't interested in romance, and never thought of Asahi as a girl. Still, Hinata teased that this trip had the feeling of turning romantic for someone. Determined not to let the opportunity slip away, Asahi declared she would go on the trip no matter what. The group gathered to plan the destination, with Hinata excitedly recognizing a location from the anime Miko princess. Ryo worried the trip would turn into another anime pilgrimage, instead of something everyone could enjoy. Asahi admitted she needed to find a place with a better atmosphere before they decided. Asahi suddenly remembered a spot she had bookmarked, an amusement park trending on social media, and pulled up the page to show the others. She revealed that she had saved the post because she'd always wanted to visit, especially since the Ferris wheel there was rumored to unite couples who rode it together. Asahi admitted she didn't fully understand it, but explained that the park was supposedly popular with young couples. Ryo suddenly snapped at Asahi for her comment, startling the rest of the club as another member tried to calm him down. Hinata gently explained that Yuta had just been dumped by his girlfriend after she found out he was secretly attending idol concerts, and told him to give up being an underground idol otaku. Wanting to help Yuta move past his heartbreak, Miyazono suggested the group choose a trip destination for his sake. Hinata added that a group of female voice actors would also be performing there. Yuta hesitated, saying it wasn't really his thing but agreed anyway, since it was a request from his best friend. Asahi grew frustrated, insisting that getting an otaku to notice her was nearly impossible. Miyazono gathered the club to talk about the trip, admitting she had been hoping to plan something more fitting for summer, instead of the idol festival idea already on the table. She pulled out a set of tickets and revealed she had gotten a special invitation for the whole club to stay at the Celine Resort Hotel, telling everyone to keep the next 3 days free. The members reacted with disbelief at the idea of staying somewhere so luxurious for free, until Miyazono explained her father owned the hotel, so there was nothing to worry about regarding cost. The group flipped through the ticket details, amazed at everything included: a buffet or set course for meals, darts, billiards, bowling, a pool, hot springs, a sauna, and even fireworks during the summer stay. Miyazono reminded Asahi to pack a swimsuit for the trip. Asahi grew flustered at the mention of it, admitting to herself that the idea felt a little embarrassing, especially with Ryo standing nearby. Once at the resort, Asahi appeared in a bikini and greeted Ryo by the pool, suggesting they make some summer memories together. Miyazono showed up in her own swimsuit, drawing an immediate reaction from Yuta and Hinata, who called her a goddess as she approached the group. Holding up her ticket, Asahi told Ryo she intended to make him understand what love truly was, determined to use this summer trip to finally get through to him. Summer vacation had arrived, and the group gathered by the pool, dressed for a day of fun. The trip was hosted at a massive resort owned by Miyazono's father, arranged as a 3-day 2-night getaway. Asahi called out to Ryo with a cheerful greeting, catching him off guard. He admitted quietly to himself that this would likely be his first and last vacation with this group. Asahi accused him outright of staring, teasing that he was a pervert who couldn't stop thinking about her even during a trip. She admitted to herself that she planned to make him fully appreciate her charms that day, noticing his eyes drifting toward her despite his denial. Asahi tugged at her swimsuit, showing it off and asking if he thought the design was cute, mentioning she had bought it specifically for the occasion. She accused him of peeking again, calling him a pervert with a satisfied grin before shoving him backward into the water. Without warning, floating on an inflatable raft, Asahi called out for Ryo to pull her along, completely at ease with giving orders despite the situation. He asked if he could downgrade her room instead, causing her to protest loudly before quickly backing down and agreeing to behave. Asahi asked him to change his pose while she teased him further, pushing him to explain his reasoning as he grew increasingly flustered. Ryo groaned about how exhausting his friends could be, admitting they were always like this. Right as another girl called out for him to pull her raft too, Kigo mentioned buying takoyaki for everyone, offering some to Makimura, while nearby Ryo lamented being the one stuck doing all the work at the pool. The group discussed trying out the resort's massive waterslide later, amazed at its size as they planned their next activity together. The girls admitted it was hard to read what the two senpai were really thinking, wondering if they were simply socially awkward rather than uninterested. Asahi and Sumuji lounged on their raft, smiling down at Ryo with clear amusement written across their faces, watching them enjoy themselves. Ryo decided to let them have their way for a little while, resigned to their antics for the day. He offered to pull their raft as a reward for their hard work, though the girls insisted the current was already strong enough on its own. The three ended up sitting together on the raft, the scene striking Ryo with an odd sense of déjà vu. He grew tense, realizing how close they were sitting, uncomfortable with the sudden proximity between them all. Asahi asked if he was nervous, wondering aloud if the reward had been too intense, while Sumuji leaned in closer. Ryo sat with water dripping down his face, gritted teeth hiding behind his hair. Two girls beside him had been teasing him all day, and he could feel his patience wearing thin. She leaned close, pressing her palm near his face, telling him with a playful grin that she wasn't letting him escape that easily. Pressed against her, Ryo felt his face burn as she pulled him closer without warning. He could only wonder what had gotten into both of them that day. A sudden strong current rocked the raft, catching all three off guard. They clung to each other as the water pushed them off balance. Later, back at the inn, the group returned exhausted from their swim. Karen greeted them, noticing how worn out the three looked after their time in the water. As the group filed inside, searching for food, one of the girls stayed quiet, watching the scene with a distant expression, as if something else was on her mind. Suddenly, Karen's father appeared, surprising everyone. He thanked the group warmly for inviting his daughter on the trip, calling it a luxurious gesture from her friends. He then turned his attention to Ryo, recalling that his daughter had spoken about him, specifically as the one who had beaten her in exam scores. Karen's father praised Kageyama's academic record, mentioning his own recommendation to Meiji University. Fixing his gaze on Ryo, Karen's father asked bluntly whether he had any interest in marrying his daughter, leaving the group stunned as the scene cut to black. During a family trip, Karen's father turns to Ryo and asks him outright if he is interested in marrying his daughter. The question catches everyone off guard. Ryo blurts out his shock, and Karen quickly cuts in, telling her father not to say such strange things. Karen's father explains his reasoning. His daughter wants to take over his company, and no matter how many times he tries to talk her out of it, she refuses to listen. He adds that he simply doesn't want his daughter throwing herself into a harsh world. He tells Ryo plainly that if a capable man marries Karen and takes over his company, that would satisfy him completely. Ryo and Karen react with disbelief while her father calmly says he'll arrange for Karen's future fiancé to join his company after graduating college. The group decides to head back to their rooms for the night, with Karen apologizing for how awkward her father made things. Karen apologizes to Ryo directly, while behind them, Ryo admits the whole conversation scared him. Karen tells Ryo she doesn't think her father is serious about the marriage talk, believing it is just his way of getting her to give up on taking over the company. Later, Karen points out to Ryo that Ryo and Miss Miyazono actually seem pretty compatible together. She notes that Ryo is the only one she has seen Miyazono talk to so casually, and that the two have been getting along well. That night, the group teases Ryo further about marrying someone pretty and landing a job at a major company, saying Miyazono should get a say in it. Ryo steps out to run errands, listing off snacks he needs to buy, when he spots Miyazono standing alone on the balcony this late at night. She turns to him, visibly upset, tears on her face. Startled, Ryo asks why she is out here and reacts to whatever just happened between them, calling it the worst. Miyazono asks if it is about what happened earlier that day. Standing together at the railing, Miyazono comments that her father is a little strange, overprotective, or maybe just stubborn. She admits that whenever she looks at her father, she feels like he doesn't expect anything from her, and that loneliness follows her because of it. She confesses that the real reason she challenged Ryo to a match was to prove to her father that she was better than someone who had once beaten her before. She admits she has been doing her best, but confesses she is tired. Ryo asks why she can't let others see this side of her. Startled, Miyazono panics, insisting she can't let anyone see her looking this pathetic. Miyazono tells Ryo he is trying too hard to look cool. She reminds him how people at school call him the unattainable one, someone perfect at everything, studying, club activities, student council. He tells her that ever since he started hanging out with her, he saw different sides of her and realized she is actually pretty normal, which makes her easier to approach. Ryo suggests that if she doesn't want everyone seeing her vulnerable side, she should relax a little on this trip. Instead, he continues, saying he already saw her cry before, so he already knows her uncool side, and tells her he'll take care of that part for her. Miyazono reacts with shock, and moments later scolds him for calling her uncool, telling him to stop crying again himself while he protests. Confused about what is happening, Miyazono needles him, asking if he is really not even going to offer a girl a handkerchief while she is crying. She grabs his sleeve to wipe her tears, complaining that he didn't have to go that far, while he awkwardly offers his sleeve, admitting he isn't exactly smooth. Ryo reminds her that he told her so, as she wipes her face on his soaked sleeve, calling him clueless. Leaning against him on the balcony, Miyazono keeps wiping her tears against his sleeve while he steadies her. He offers again, telling her to just take his sleeve. Standing alone afterward, Miyazono thinks back on the idea that if it were him, Ryo, the first person who ever beat her, he would treat her as an equal. She admits she never expected to end up hoping for that. Tears fall as she admits she never thought she would end up feeling this way. Watching from a distance, another girl spots Ryo and Miyazono together on the balcony, remarking that he is the one who is actually trying too hard to look cool. Her eyes narrow before she turns and rushes off down the hallway. Kageyama Ryo waited outside a door, telling Makimura he needed to talk to her. She agreed to get straight to the point, wondering what he wanted. Ryo asked her plainly to stop getting involved with President Karen from now on. He admitted Karen was stronger, more beautiful, and more perfect than anyone else. Makimura asked him why that mattered. Ryo explained that ever since Karen started spending time with her, she seemed to have lost the dignity she once carried. Makimura countered that Karen wasn't perfect, and asked if that was really such a bad thing. Left alone, Makimura thought to herself that Karen hated losing, worked hard, and liked showing off. Ryo, walking with someone else, said goodnight, admitting he actually found the imperfect side of Miyazono far more interesting. Makimura, overhearing, quietly repeated the word, interesting, to herself. The scene shifted to a hotel breakfast buffet, where Yuta and their friends marveled at the spread, unable to decide between bread and rice. Asahi greeted the group with a simple good morning, though her expression looked tired and distracted. She returned the greeting awkwardly, clearly still bothered by what had happened the day before, while the others noticed something was off with her. Ryo, holding a plate, greeted Asahi mid-sentence, but stopped short when he noticed the exhausted look on her face. Summonon teased that Asahi was in trouble and asked if she hadn't slept, as she quietly bit into her food. The group settled in to eat together. Ryo asked what she'd been doing up so late, and a friend added that she must have stayed up all night. Startled, Asahi abruptly stood and said she was heading back to her room. She apologized under her breath, and the others scolded themselves for comparing a girl to a bear, admitting it was insensitive, and clearly the reason she got upset. Ryo stayed silent, privately admitting he couldn't believe what had just happened. As they entered the trail, the group reminded each other to stay together and not wander off the path since they could easily get lost. One of the girls offered to make sure Ryo got paired with Miyazono, hinting at feelings between them. A girl wondered quietly whether Asahi was still upset, since they had already apologized. Asahi insisted she wasn't sulking, though her expression said otherwise. Ryo asked her directly how much longer she planned to keep sulking. Asahi sighed and repeated that she wasn't sulking. But Ryo pointed out that she obviously was, and that Yehuda and everyone had been worried about her since morning. Ryo told Asahi that letting things build up like this had always been her bad habit. Asahi snapped back, telling him to stop lecturing her over every little thing, admitting she hated his condescending attitude. Her frustration spilled over as she shouted that she had always hated it. Trying to laugh it off, Asahi insisted she was seriously fine, though her forced smile didn't convince the friends watching from a distance. Asahi apologized to the group for ruining the mood. Ryo told her plainly that if she hated his attitude that much, she should stop going out of her way to pick fights with him. When one of the girls warned it was dangerous to go back alone, Asahi insisted the path was straight, so she'd be fine, and apologized to her senpai before heading off. Tsumugi spoke up, claiming she had a blister and couldn't continue climbing, offering to let the others go ahead. She said she would go back with Asahi instead. Ryo reasoned that since the hotel was just ahead and the path was straight, he'd be fine walking alone. Left alone in the woods, Asahi sat quietly on a fallen log, wincing in pain and rubbing her ankle after the fall. Kohinata caught up to her, saying she wanted to talk to Asahi alone. Startled, Asahi asked what was wrong. Kohinata said she'd get straight to the point. Standing beneath the trees, Kohinata asked her directly if she liked Ryo. Deep in the forest, Miss Kohinata stopped and asked Asahi a direct question. Did she like Kageyama? Asahi froze, completely caught off guard by the sudden accusation. Kohinata pressed on, saying it was obvious just from looking at her. Asahi stammered, demanding to know why she'd say that, but Kohinata simply asked if they should stop those two from getting closer. Kohinata revealed her real request. She wanted Asahi to convince Ryo to stay away from President Karen, believing it would help her own chances. Kohinata called it a mutually beneficial partnership, insisting that, as president, Karen should remain noble and never bow to anyone. She waited for Asahi's answer. Asahi refused. Quietly but firmly, she apologized and said she couldn't do what Kohinata was asking. Kohinata asked why not. Asahi admitted she was shy and clumsy, laughing awkwardly as she confessed she'd never really had friends growing up. Around Ryo, Asahi said she became an open book, ending up too dependent on him and saying things she shouldn't, calling herself hopeless. Asahi admitted she caused Ryo constant trouble, standing between two people who mattered so much to her. Asahi declared she loved both Kageyama, Senpai and Miyazono. Senpai insisting she loved everyone a lot. Kohinata simply replied that she understood. The fireworks were about to start, so the group hurried back toward the hotel. Kohinata apologized for her strange suggestion earlier and asked Asahi to forget it. Elsewhere, Makimura. Senpai suggested taking a shortcut through the woods, claiming she knew the path well. Frustration boiled over between another pair, with sharp words exchanged about feelings long kept hidden, ending in visible irritation. Back near the hotel, Miyazono grew anxious. She hadn't heard from Tsumugi or Kohinata and worried something was wrong. Ryo volunteered to search for Asahi himself, brushing off warnings that the woods were dangerous at night. Alone in the dark forest, Ryo shouted Asahi's name, frustrated that she'd vanished after he'd told her not to bother him. He spotted a small shed with light leaking from inside, and approached cautiously. Ryo pried the door open. Inside, Asahi looked up, startled, and called out his name in disbelief. Relieved, he told her they needed to head back since Miyazono, and the others were worried, but he stumbled and fell forward. Moments later, the two stood close together near the shed, sharing a quiet, comfortable exchange. Kohinata found them there and cut in sharply, telling them both to think things through before going any further. Ryo muttered, seriously, under his breath, standing beside Asahi as the chapter closed, leaving their moment unresolved. Ryo and Asahi remain trapped together after their argument. Ryo tries sending another message for help, but it fails, leaving them with no choice except to wait until someone notices them. The timing could not be worse. Ryo is still angry about their earlier fight, and refuses to forgive Asahi unless she properly apologizes to him. Asahi notices Ryo staring in her direction, and immediately becomes suspicious. Embarrassed by his attention, she warns him not to get any strange ideas while they are alone. Ryo quickly denies it, still irritated. He bluntly tells Asahi that he has never thought of her romantically and currently finds her behavior especially annoying. Asahi retaliates by mentioning Miyazono. She reminds Ryo that he spent the previous night getting along with another girl and sarcastically congratulates him for suddenly becoming popular. Her words make Ryo realize she is deliberately provoking him again. Asahi quietly admits that he has a point, but her expression shows she is far from satisfied. Ryo explains that Miyazono is kind, attractive, and easy to talk with. Unlike Asahi, he can easily imagine seeing Miyazono as a woman. That comparison pushes Asahi too far. She suddenly lunges toward Ryo, knocking him backward before he can understand what she intends to do. Ryo lands on the floor with Asahi above him. Startled by the sudden closeness, he demands to know what she is thinking. Asahi continues challenging him, while Ryo struggles to process the situation. Asahi accuses Ryo of lying when he claims he could never see her romantically. She believes his nervous reaction proves that his words are not completely true. Seeing his embarrassment only makes Asahi more confident. She teasingly calls him out, convinced she has finally exposed the weakness behind his tough response. Ryo finally loses patience. He turns the situation around and warns Asahi that if she insists on provoking him, he will stop treating the argument like a harmless joke. Asahi immediately realizes she has pushed too far. Her confidence disappears as Ryo reminds her that she was the one who started this confrontation. Ryo explains that being childhood friends does not give Asahi permission to provoke him endlessly. His serious expression makes the warning impossible to dismiss. He tells her that continuing this behavior will only make things more awkward between them. For once, Asahi cannot produce a clever comeback. Asahi becomes genuinely frightened and asks Ryo to stop. Hearing her desperate voice causes his anger to fade before the situation goes any further. Overwhelmed, Asahi begins crying. The teasing attitude she carried moments earlier completely disappears, leaving only embarrassment and regret. She finally gives Ryo the apology he demanded, admitting she was wrong for starting the fight, acting arrogantly, and repeatedly saying hurtful things to him. Ryo freezes after hearing her sincere apology. The tense confrontation ends abruptly, and Asahi reacts defensively when he moves closer. With the tension finally easing, Ryo tries to regain his confidence. He tells Asahi not to make reckless provocations when she cannot handle the consequences, confidently claiming she could never defeat him anyway. Their private moment ends at the worst possible time when the door suddenly opens. The misunderstanding spreads instantly. Kageyama and the others stare at them in stunned silence, already imagining what might have happened while the two were trapped alone. The others returned to check on Asahi and found her already awake. Ryo stood outside the door, hesitating with his fist raised before he could bring himself to knock. Later he laughed off her collapse as a mild case of heatstroke, though the truth behind it was something else entirely. Back at the clubroom, Tsumugi noticed Kageyama had arrived, drawing everyone's attention as he walked in with a troubled expression. Kageyama bowed low before Tsumugi and the others, apologizing sincerely. He explained he had meant to let her out before the fireworks ended. Tsumugi asked him directly why he had done it, pointing out that unless he spoke honestly, no one would be able to understand his reasons. Kageyama admitted that President Karen had always been kept at a distance by those around her, something that quietly troubled her. Tsumugi apologized in turn, admitting she hadn't noticed how empty things had felt between them, as though Karen had never fully opened her heart to her. The two realized they had only ever talked about student council duties, nothing more. Karen reached out and suggested they start over, not just as council members, but as real friends. Back with the group, Karen thanked everyone warmly, though she still felt she couldn't be completely at ease with what had happened. Ryo laid out the terms plainly. If Asahi forgave her, he'd let it go this time. But if not, Karen would no longer be welcome near their club. It was ultimately Asahi's call. Karen simply said she wanted everyone to get along, leaving Asahi quiet for a moment, as she processed the request. Asahi agreed to consider it a favor, owed, closing the matter. Kageyama, catching sight of the commotion around them, looked on with quiet satisfaction. The trip wound down in chaos, with everyone scrambling over missing souvenirs, unpacked bags, and a checkout time nearly missed. Walking back afterward, Karen apologized again for ruining the fireworks the night before, but was told they could always see them next year. The fireworks finally lit up the sky above the whole group together, a quiet moment of peace after everything that had happened. They soon realized the display was actually part of a nearby theme park's daytime parade, a stroke of luck that left the two seniors amused. Karen thanked everyone for letting her join their circle, gratitude clear on her face. Elsewhere, Makimura was invited to join their club too, but declined, admitting that seeing Kageyama close to Karen would be more than she could handle. As they boarded the return bus, someone realized it had already arrived, sending the group into another scramble. At the station, they crossed paths with a familiar face heading home with her father, exchanging quick goodbyes as the trip came to its end. Kageyama thanked Ryo and Karen for everything, saying he'd had a great time. Then he turned to Ryo directly, asking if he could finally get an answer to the marriage proposal, now that the two of them had managed to meet face to face at last. Ryo apologized and declined firmly, making clear his mind had been made up from the very start. Karen's father asked him to explain, admitting it was hard to put into words. Ryo clarified, it wasn't that he hated the idea of marriage itself, he simply believed her daughter didn't need someone like him. He told the father plainly that he had a brilliant, hard-working daughter, and it would be a waste for him not to believe in her. The father accepted the answer, admitting Ryo might be right, then thanked him for his honesty and wished him a safe trip home. As Ryo said his goodbyes to Karen and turned to leave, his friends called out that the bus was about to leave without him, sending him into a scramble. Karen called out his name softly as he ran off, watching him go with a quiet, unreadable expression. Later, in a tender moment between them, Ryo took her hand and told her plainly that he loved her. Karen stood frozen, tears welling up as the words sank in, overwhelmed by the confession. Ryo watched her reaction with a faint, teasing smile creeping across his face. Karen insisted she was being serious and told him not to brush it off, suspecting he was just teasing her again. He assured her he wasn't falling for that kind of doubt. He clarified, he wasn't asking for an answer right away, telling her to take her time and think it over. She was caught off guard, saying he couldn't just spring something like that on her so suddenly. As they parted ways at the bus stop, Karen simply said she'd see him next semester, walking off composed, despite everything that had just happened between them. On the ride home, Karen's mind drifted back to another memory of Ryo telling her he'd look at her with dirty thoughts. Back with his friends, someone asked what had actually happened between him and President Karen. Ryo, flustered and grinning, could only blurt out the confession itself. A confession replays in Asahi's mind, a senior telling a girl he loved her, calling it his first and last love. Ryo snaps up from the couch, shouting that topics like love, crushes, and marriage are strictly forbidden around him. Asahi pouts around her popsicle, clearly unconvinced. Ryo crosses his arms and declares flatly that he has no interest in romance and isn't looking for it either. Her mind drifts back to the last day of a trip, when Miyazono confessed her feelings to Ryo in front of her. Asahi can't process why he'd reject her, wondering since when he became like this. Ryo mutters to himself that romance is completely irrelevant to him, unsure of what to do about any of it. Asahi quietly asks her senior why he feels that way. Caught off guard, Ryo starts to answer, but hesitates. Asahi looks at him and asks directly if he is really so against the whole idea of romance. His phone suddenly rings. Asahi tells him to listen and stay calm before he answers, and the caller identifies herself as Asahi's mother, sending a jolt of alarm through the room. Outside the medical center, Ryo hears grave news over the phone. His father has just been brought in after an accident at the hospital where she works. Ryo bursts into the room in shock, calling out for his dad, Asahi, right behind him. His father greets them casually from the bed, and Asahi's mother working as his nurse. His father apologizes for worrying them, insisting it is just a fracture and he'll be fine. The nurse explains he'll need a few days of observation just to be safe, apologizing for the trouble. Ryo says it is no bother at all, just glad it wasn't life. Threatening later. Sitting together on a bench, Asahi remarks that Ryo's dad seems more energetic than she expected. Ryo replies with a quiet, distant, yeah, his expression unreadable. Asahi leans in, asking if he is okay, sensing something is weighing on him. Ryo suddenly asks why she has always stayed by his side since childhood, wondering if it is because she has no other friends, or just needs someone to annoy. He points out she has seemed lonelier since his mom passed away, asking her the real reason. Ryo recalls always watching her from afar, noting her dad's constant absence for work and her reluctance to return to an empty house. Tearing up, Asahi finally admits she didn't want him to be all alone. She brightens instantly, insisting she just came to celebrate with him, sniffling before offering to walk him home since he is alone today too. Ryo reflects that liking someone, dating, marrying always risks losing them suddenly, admitting he is terrified of getting close to anyone again. Asahi tells Ryo she loves everyone in the club, saying it is exactly why she wants to cherish the time she spends with them before the seniors graduate, and everyone eventually has to say goodbye. She adds that, if there is someone important he wants to be with forever, he should spend as much time with them as possible, so he won't have regrets when that goodbye eventually comes. Ryo admits she is right, catching her off guard. When she asks what he means, he tells her that for being Asahi, she has got some good points. He rests his hand on her head, saying he guesses he has no choice if she is still afraid of him being alone. Asahi smiles and tells him she wouldn't mind staying by his side forever. She blushes, quietly touched by her own words. Ryo admits he feels like she'll keep haunting him for the rest of his life, and asks if she is happy about that. Alone in her room, Asahi reflects that she'd been using those words about romance being irrelevant to run away, even though she doesn't want a girlfriend or anyone to love. She decides she'll try to face it head on without being a coward, telling someone over the phone. She'll think it over and give an answer soon. Lying in bed, Ryo thinks about the person he wants to be with forever, the person most important to him. Elsewhere, a boy from Kusunari High wonders if Ryo is doing well, mentioning someone he was close with in middle school might be at the cultural festival. Kageyama announced to the Modern Culture Exchange Club that their attraction for the school festival would be a cosplay photo studio, and the members cheered in agreement. Ryo froze when Asahi turned to him, her cheeks flushed, as she asked him to pick up some supplies while he was out. With the new semester underway, the club stayed buried in festival preparations. Asahi handed Ryo a list, warning him not to act strange about it, and to behave as he always did. The two walked to the store together, Asahi checking off items like tape, fabric, and paint, while Ryo carried the bag, both agreeing to give the festival their best effort. Asahi admitted she wanted to help however she could, since she'd caused everyone trouble before, surprising the others with her sewing skills. Strange restlessness crept over Ryo whenever he was with Asahi lately, an unfamiliar feeling he couldn't quite place, even as she chatted eagerly beside him. Their walk was interrupted when a delinquent-looking guy spotted Ryo and called out his name, startling Asahi. The stranger turned out to be Kakeru, an old middle school friend who hadn't seen Ryo since graduation, noting he hadn't changed at all. Kakeru recognized Asahi immediately, delighted that she was still by Ryo's side after all these years, and that the two remained close. Kakeru leaned in close to Asahi, teasing that she'd gotten much cuter, flustering her completely as he asked for her contact information. Ryo watched the exchange with confusion, wondering how someone could change so drastically in just 3 years. Memories surfaced of their middle school days when Kakeru had been quieter, sharing anime talk with Ryo. Kakeru's friends called him away, and he said goodbye to Asahi and Ryo, leaving Ryo staring after him in silence. Later, Kakeru approached again, greeting Asahi warmly as she walked beside Ryo. He leaned toward her, brushing her hair back, while Ryo watched from behind, his expression unreadable. Asahi covered her face, overwhelmed and embarrassed by Kakeru's closeness. Ryo suddenly grabbed her hand and pulled her along, his face set and serious as he walked away without a word. Kakeru smirked knowingly at the sight, while Asahi gasped, hurrying to keep pace with Ryo as he urged her to move faster. Back home, Asahi scrolled through a social media post of Kakeru surrounded by rough-looking friends, uneasy about the company he kept, until Ryo interrupted. Ryo explained the others were busy elsewhere, leaving them free. But Asahi mentioned she already had plans to meet someone tomorrow. When Ryo demanded to know why she'd suddenly gotten a meeting arranged, Asahi simply smiled and said it was a secret, refusing to explain further. Confused by her reaction, Ryo pressed for details, but Asahi only looked back at him with an innocent, questioning expression before he awkwardly excused himself. Before leaving, Ryo rattled off a string of warnings, telling her to be home by 8 and to firmly refuse if anyone offered her cigarettes or alcohol. Watching her walk away, Ryo told himself he had no right to stop her, and that it would actually be good for Asahi to widen her circle of friends. Alone, he wondered why he felt so restless, reasoning that once he no longer had to watch over her, he could finally enjoy a peaceful otaku life without interruption. The next day, Asahi excitedly told him about playing darts for the first time, and how skilled Kakeru was at it. But when she asked if he was jealous, Ryo warned her not to get too close to Kakeru, claiming he seemed to be running with a bad crowd. But Asahi hesitated, unsure if that was really true. She defended Kakeru, insisting he was a good person, while Ryo's expression darkened with quiet doubt. Asahi's trusting nature meant she had little skill at reading people or sensing danger, and when she mentioned Kakeru was coming to the school festival, on festival day, Asahi and another club member dressed up as cosplay characters, drawing customers to their photo booth attraction. Overwhelmed by nerves around the visiting boys, Asahi hoped the experience would help her overcome her shyness, while the customers eagerly paid for photos. When Ryo covered a shift, he learned that Asahi had gone on break after a blonde boy had called her away, leaving him uneasy. Meanwhile, Kakeru showed up at another booth, complimenting the president on a homemade cookie stand, as festivities continued around them. Kakeru told Asahi, still in her Alice costume, that she'd looked cute earlier, and she reacted with quiet surprise. Later, she begged him not to tease her about it, while Kakeru laughed, remarking that Ryo hadn't reacted to her costume at all, despite how hard she'd tried. A flashback revealed young Ryo, scolding a younger Asahi for not using honorifics, insisting she call him senpai properly, a memory that still lingered in their dynamic. Asahi admitted to herself that despite Kakeru giving her advice on love, things weren't improving, and remembering how Ryo used to act only made her sadder. Kakeru gently asked her why she'd never considered giving up, pointing out she'd been treated with so little hope for years. Fighting back tears, Asahi confessed silently how much she loved Ryo, even calling him unfair for making her feel this way. Kakeru sat beside her, comforting her quietly as she leaned close, his ringed hand resting nearby in the fading light. A phone message came through, someone telling Ryo she was waiting at the outdoor stairs, and asking him to come too, right as he wondered aloud what Kakeru and the others were up to. Following the message, Ryo arrived to find Kakeru sitting close to Asahi, her head bowed near him, and the sight stopped Ryo cold, leaving him staring in stunned silence. Asahi jumped in surprise as Ryo appeared behind her. He asked flatly if she was on a break too, calling her senpai's junior in the usual dry tone. Kakeru stood nearby watching as Asahi grabbed Ryo's arm and pulled him along, calling out to stop him from walking off on his own. Asahi complained that her hand hurt from holding on so tight, dragging Ryo through the crowded festival hallway decorated with hanging hearts. She pulled him into the archive room, the door swinging shut behind them as festival noise faded outside. Ryo muttered that something was annoying him, and Asahi noticed his mood shift, asking what was wrong with him. She pointed out that he and Kakeru had seemed close earlier, while he explained he'd been watching the store by himself. Asahi snapped back that she had only been talking to Kakeru-senpai, confused about why that mattered to him at all. Ryo admitted to himself that hearing about Kakeru over and over was starting to irritate him more than he expected. Asahi asked if he was sulking, and he stayed silent, refusing to answer her directly. She teased that he had wanted to walk the festival with her, but she'd gone off with Kakeru-senpai instead, calling him out for sulking. Asahi grinned and said he was too cute for his own good, adding that he should have just told her he was looking forward to their time together. Without warning, Ryo grabbed her and pulled her close, pressing her against the table as she let out a startled sound. He admitted the whole situation was annoying him, and her face lit up in surprise as she asked if he really meant what he said about seeing the festival together. He reminded her that she had promised they'd stay together the entire day, yet she had left him behind despite that promise. Asahi tried to explain that wasn't her intention, but he cut in, saying that once she found someone else to hang around with, he became useless to her. Holding her firmly, he asked what she had really been doing with Kakeru. refusing to let her look away as she insisted it was nothing. Tears welled up as Asahi begged him not to stay angry, promising they could experience everything together from now on. Still crying, she watched as Ryo warned her never to get close to anyone but him again. He pulled her into a tight embrace, her voice catching in surprise as she called out to stop him. Their lips met as she struggled weakly against him, her protest fading into the quiet moment between them. Their kiss deepened, as Asahi's protest faded into a soft plea, her fingers gripping his shirt as he held her close. She squeezed her eyes shut, a small cry escaping her as he continued, her body trembling under his grip. Outside, their classmates chattered about taking photos and heading to the planetarium, one of them noticing Kageyama-senpai acting strange today. Back in the archive room, Ryo wrapped his arms tighter around Asahi, his gaze sharp as his hand brushed against her clothing. Asahi gasped and warned him he couldn't keep going, worried their classmates outside would hear them if he wasn't careful. Just then, a voice broke through, telling them that was enough, and Ryo turned to see Ryo's friend standing in the doorway, arms crossed and asking if he was okay.